all these amazing people that came through the sport. Like they went around the same anchors now that are brittle and rusted and broken apart at the bottom of the lake and just slid out of the way. But I know the story that goes behind those, and it's cool to be at the bottom. And that was an anchor definitely that's probably the 70s. Oh, here's some 80s anchors. Oh, I remember when they went through this phase in the early 90s and they tried getting away with this. And then now here we are setting in, what an anchor's an anchor to a point. But, here's our mark. Here's our footprint on Robin Lake. And this one will be here to stay a lot longer than, a record book or something like that. This is a foundation of the Masters, which is cool to be a part of that.
Hello, and welcome back or welcome to the Waterski Podcast. This is Matteo, your host, and the goal of this podcast is always to promote the great sport of water skiing through voices of people in the sport and other type of content. This episode is episode 93, which is part 2 with Zack Worden. It's coming out a little late as I just made it back from Miami, where I went for a quick trip to compete in the Miami Pro, the last stop of the Waterski Pro Tour. Didn't go as well as I wanted on the skiing side of things, but it was nevertheless fun to attend a new event at its second edition, see some friends, and struggle with the usual challenge of turning as many buoys as possible at the shortest line possible. Back to the episode, this part 2 with Zack is very deep. Zack has had a multifaceted water skiing experience, and certainly this part 2 reflects it in the many roles that he has taken into the sport. But we also talk about water ski jumping, technique, advice for families and young jumpers, the experience of jumping, which Zack claims that it's hard to put into words, and I would certainly agree with that. And I'm sure other jumpers listening can relate to the fact that jumping is just the best feeling in water skiing, but when you have to put it down to words, it's quite challenging. But we tried nevertheless. We also talk about Zack's father and his experience into TCing and technical controlling, and how that inspired Zack himself and his good friend Jon Travers, whom we heard from in previous episodes, to carry the tradition in this important service. And on top of that, also the work that the two of them have done in installing courses around the US and around the world. I really hope you will enjoy this episode, which is brought to you by the Peace, Love and Water Skiing. Peace, Love and Water Skiing is Corey Vaughan's ski school and merchandise brand. Corey has been inspired by the great water ski sites all over the world: San Gervasio, Lacanau, Radar Lake, Swiss Ski School, the boarding school, etc., and has been working to make his site one of the must-visit water ski destinations. You can receive coaching from Corey Vaughan and Mike Kuziak on a wind-protected, man-made lake with the new Mastercraft Pro Star. Add to that new lodging facilities right on the water, a loaded pro shop, a full line of radar demos, all on hundreds of acres of beautiful Virginia countryside, and you may just think you've gone to water ski heaven. And I don't know, I can say water ski heaven is a very accurate description of the place. I've had a chance to visit Corey in Bumpass, Virginia, and what a gem of a place he operates with Amelia. The vibes and the skiing, the view is just breathtaking. So the ski season in Bumpass is from April 1st to November 1st, so this is a good time to start thinking about lining up a trip for next spring. Also, listeners of the Waterski Podcast can enjoy 10% off all merchandise in Corey's online store by entering the code TWSP, all caps. So go to peaceloveandwaterskiing.com to learn more about the ski school and get 10% off any Peace Love and Water Skiing gear. So again, peaceloveandwaterskiing.com in the online store, 10% off with TWSP. All right, without further ado, let's jump back into this second part with Zack. It's the off season now, so I'm hoping to be a little bit more consistent in publishing until the end of the year and for the next handful of months. There's already more content coming your way. So until then, enjoy this part 2 with Zack.
Cool.
Let's do it, Zack. So we're back for part 2. We left talking about your first pro win.
Yep.
And if I know anything about pro skiing, is that it's not very linear, right? So you're up one day, you're down another day. Talk to me a little bit about the first 2 or 3 years. You know, you had a win pretty early on, I would say. How was the experience of now traveling, not necessarily representing your country, but representing yourself, trying to make, ends meet with cash prize, flying to the other side of the world? Like, how did you take care of those early days?
So I mean, the first year I was skiing professional, I hadn't committed to a college yet. I was still finishing up high school. It was that summer that I had won my first pro event. Committed to go to school in Monroe in Louisiana.
Yep.
And at that point, that's kind of when I was out from under. I don't say out from under my parents, but I was no longer working alongside my parents, or they were no longer directly funding kind of everything going on. And, I had my allowance going to college and stuff, and they were going to do everything in their power to help support my pro skiing. I was fortunate enough after that first year kind of going into college and my first big season on tour, I had some really good success. I was able to sign with Nautique. I had 10 really amazing years with Nautique, and financially, my family's a very middle-class family. We don't have a ton of excess cash, so me getting sponsored and the ability to have a boat and bring in a little monthly check really went a long ways for me to able to kind of get myself from out under my parents and kind of do things a little more on my own. Granted, if you ask my mom, she, to this day, she still helps with, keeping me in line. But I think the first year on tour, I had just started at Monroe, and I had won 3 pro tour stops over the course of that year. So I had won LA Night Jam. I had won King of Darkness the previous summer, and then skied a couple more tournaments throughout the year. I hadn't qualified for World Cups yet. Mm-hmm. I wasn't high enough on the elite ranking list. I think I had skied a Worlds, might have been a Worlds year in Canada, and I had a couple of local-ish pro events that I had skied and finished maybe top 8 and top 5 in. The next season, I really is when everything clicked. It was my first I had a full year at 6 foot under my belt. I had been training. I was 18, getting ready to go off to college. I was finishing up high school. At that point at high school, I'd been going to school online. Yep. Living here at Jack's in this tower that we're recording in. My desk was right over here to the left, and I spent not as much time at that desk as I should have. Okay. But I ended up getting through high school and get everything finished, and I went off to Monroe. But that summer, what would have been my last under 21 Worlds, I elected. It was in Spain. I believe Botas had hosted it there. I elected not to ski there, and I had gone to a Pro Tour stop in Madrid at
Alvaro's place, right?
Yeah, at Alvaro's place. And so I'd gone there, and I ended up winning that event. And that was the first time, and that was actually the last time that I ever, and that's the last time I ever kicked Freddie's ass. That was the one event where, usually if I had was close to Freddie and fast forwarding a couple years, we were always a few feet apart. He never beat me by a huge margin while we were both skiing really well, and I never beat him by a huge margin. And that was the one event where we were right at that 65-meter mark for most of the tournament, practice rounds, prelims. We had done like an 8-man final down to a 4-man final down to a 2-man final. We did a similar format there. And I remember in the finals, I had gone out first, or I'd gone out second, and I cracked off like a 69.9. And so still have the course record there.
Nice.
And cracked off a massive jump, and Freddie still had like a 66, but every jump going up to that was big. But that was the first and the last time that I laid an ass whooping down on Freddie. And I think after that, if I did win, it wasn't by much. But I had taken Madrid. That was an awesome tournament. We had gone to Malibu Open in Milwaukee, and I had won there. I was third seed going out, and then Damian Sharman was actually top seed there. Mm-hmm. And I'd gone out, jumped really well. Freddie missed me by a couple feet, and then unfortunately Damo had taken a pretty big crash in the finals there. I won Malibu Open, and then that's when I first qualified for my first World Cup I had ever skied, and ended up being my last World Cup because it kind of went away right after that 2011, 2012 year. And so I went to Liang, China. And it was pro jump, men and women, and pro wakeboard, men and women. And that was a really cool site. I mean, that was the first time where IWSF, they paid for our travel to go there. They put us up in a hotel. There wasn't an entry fee. There wasn't any of this. We were simply brought there to put on a show and a performance on a high cash prize event. And I was like, my God, this is this is awesome. And I ended up edging out Freddie by just a little bit there for a World Cup in China. So that was my second year on tour. My first big year at 6 foot that I had a year under my belt, and everything was aligning. I was finishing. I didn't miss a podium all year except for once. I got a fourth at an event up in Michigan. I'd skied every Pro Tour stop that I could fund myself to get to, and I made pretty decent money that year. I signed with Nautique that year, started college in Monroe, and that was kind of a fun entry to the Pro Tour. Yeah. Had some really great success early on, and really kind of got me excited for what the future would hold, and had some success the following year. Ended up blowing my knee out, and that's kind of, after that big year I had, that's kind of when my injuries unfortunately started. And blew my knee out in 2012, and then was rehabbing from that first knee. I blew it out in April. I had surgery. And then in October of that year, I was starting to ski again. I wasn't going over the ramp, but I had slalomed a little bit and was starting to ride my skis. And I blew the same knee out again in rehab doing squats.
I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was at the end of 2012, and just having two back-to-back ACLs blown, my knee was pretty shot. And so that was 2012. I competed again a little bit in 2013. At the beginning of the year, I had gone to LA Night Jam. He had it again, but I competed at 5.5. Yeah. I skied well. I think I went like 219. Oh, wow. I set a new men's one record, which still stands. So that was cool. But had some okay success there, and finished off the rest of the year. Really tried to take it easy. Excuse me. Really tried to take it easy towards the tail end of that year. Coming into 2014 season, ended up having some really good success towards that season. That's kind of when a lot of things shifted in my pro career. At the time, I was getting into technical controlling a little bit more. Starting off that season, I was starting to ski really well again, but the thing with my dad, we had lost my dad at the start of the Pro Tour stops that year, and we had the U.S. Open. Not too long after, I skied really awesome at the U.S. Open. I ended up getting into like a jump off, which never happens, and ended up winning the U.S. Open at my dad's lake where he had helped organize the event the year before. And I finished third at the Rocket Man. I had finished third at Chile Night Jump, and then we had gone down to Colombia at the tail end of 2014 season, and had some really rough conditions down there. We had a lot of altitude, and that night it was super calm out, but we had a big fog storm roll in, and ended up landing a little weird in some foggy conditions, and I blew my left knee out, my other knee out. And that's the one that it took me a while to mentally kind of get over. I got back competing again, but I started competing for the wrong reason. I was competing for money, and I was competing to try to make a living, to try to keep my sponsors. And I really stopped competing for myself. That's was a big transition period around that tail end of 2014. Started skiing again in 2015. Skied well, but I just never could put together in tournaments. I had this huge mental block. And that lasted for a couple years. And I think towards the tail end of my pro career was 18, 19, kind of getting towards 20. I started working full time. Was working for a dock builder, building docks, construction, some manual labor stuff, which wasn't ideal, but I enjoyed it and it was fun, and I was bringing in a consistent paycheck every week. So those last couple of years I had on tour were probably some of my most fun. Being able to, I wasn't worried if I didn't make the cut, and then I wasn't all of a sudden, I don't know how I'm going to come up with this $2,000 that I put on a credit card to book my flight there. I was able to enjoy my skiing, and I got back to that mentality that I was back in 2011, 2012, where I was just having fun. And I skied really well. I didn't win anything, but I had a couple. I had a top 3 finish in there. I had a couple, top 5 finishes, which at that point I was thrilled to be there. Yeah. And I went out. And those last couple years were, I'd say, probably some of my most fun years on tour. Even though I didn't win like I wanted to or have the success that I had at a younger age, I had a lot of fun, man. And really cherish those memories coming back from it.
It's interesting how you reverted back to to a similar approach to it for completely different reasons, in completely different stages of life, and with a lot of things happening in between those 2011 years, to the 2018s. I'm curious about the TC stuff, and as you know, I interviewed John and we spoke at length about it. But when did your dad start to do TCing work, and how did you get exposed to it?
So, like I kind of earlier, my family, we did well for ourselves, but we were a middle class family, and the way that my dad was able to help afford for me to ski and train and buy new gear was, he was trading labor for labor. And so he started working here at Jack's, and he had a background in TV, audio, visual communications. He understood wiring and cameras and TVs and setups. So TCing, he got into it more so from the tech side of stuff. So, he ran a TV shop back in our hometown and stuff. So he provided TVs to Jack's, and he would sell them to Jack and Leilani at cost, or give them to Jack and Leilani at cost, and in trade, I would be able to ski X amount of sets, you know,
Okay.
and it was a relationship like that. So, just the way I was kind of raised by my parents, it felt necessary to help contribute or help him, because I saw what he was doing for me and what he was sacrificing in order to put me through skiing and help afford my dream. You know, it was time to do what I could to kind of give back and help out. So when it came time to him to start, you know, he could provide the technical stuff. He understands the aspects behind it. Gene Davis kind of took him under his wing, and Gene was kind of aging out of the TC realm, or you could tell he kind of wanted to start aging out, but there was no one to step in his footsteps here at Jack's. And so he kind of groomed my dad to be able to come in and run the show.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's when JT and I were lake rats for him. You know, we need to go out there, and this is before we had all the GPS stuff. You know, we buoy by buoy put the prism on there, and we learned a lot. And you know, I knew just as much as every TC out there. I just had never taken the test or been approved for it. But because I had worked so closely with my dad and working together with somebody who knows what they're thinking, they don't have to shout out what they need you to do. You just kind of, that's how you work together. That's how JT and I work together now. Yeah. And so I learned a lot from my dad TCing and kind of growing up here by a means of being able to afford for me to ski.
Yeah.
And my way of kind of helping him, you know, thanks, Dad. You know, I'm too young to work yet. You know, I can't go and get a job, or it's not going to be worth me going and getting a job at a convenience store or a grocery store, whatever. This is my way of contributing to my ski fund, so to speak. And fast forward, that snowballed, and so my dad kind of got picked up on tour. All the jumpers and a lot of the skiers trusted him. You know, he was a younger guy, understood what the skiers wanted, and was able to relay that to kind of the officials that may have been in the game a long time. And he helped bridge the gap between the older generation and the younger generation, and was a great voice for us on things we wanted to see change or bringing change into the TC community.
Yeah.
And so he started going on tour with us. And so, like, when I won that first event in Michigan, you know, he was up there 3 days before I was, getting the lake set up, getting everything prepped. And, you know, we started putting on tournaments. We did a tournament at Lake Eola. Him and I were out there.
That's right.
Dropping in buoys and, you know, in downtown Orlando for a course. And we did it at Ivanhoe. And so he kind of became this, if you needed someone to put on a Pro Tour stop that wasn't at a Jack's, a Swiss, a Bennett's, a Corey's, you know, you called John Worden to come run your event.
How cool is that?
And it was great, because my dad was, first couple years on tour, he was able to watch me progress and win on tour and have really good success. And he wasn't having to fly himself. That, you know, he was getting flown there. He was working his ass off. I'll give you that. And I helped out where I could, but he was good about, you know, you need to go back to the hotel and rest. I'm going to wrap up here at the lake, and I'll see you back at the hotel later. But it was really cool to be able to have him alongside me through my early career on tour, and probably was best to have him there as kind of my watchdog to make sure I didn't get myself in too much trouble, right, or wander too far from where I needed to be. And so it became second nature helping him, and I knew the system, and the same for JT, and everything really kind of came together at when my dad had his accident and was in the hospital for a little while. I know on JT's he alluded to this a little bit, but, you know, JT basically, at the time, there was a small TC test, but you basically had to have a senior sign off on you and say, I give him the green light. As long as he passes the test, he's good to go. You know, There wasn't a qualification period where you have to spend a year as an assistant and kind of a couple-year trial to work your way up to a senior. At the time, we needed TCs, and my dad signed off JT to be a TC from the hospital, you know.
Wow.
And knowing that the U.S. Open was coming up later in that year, and got JT all squared away. Everything was good to go, and things didn't work out the way we had hoped, and Dad had passed, and we had the U.S. Open where it was going to be on Lake Ivanhoe, kind of back where it had originated in Orlando, and it was this big thing we were trying to bring to the city and bring back, and it kind of fell on JT and myself to make it happen, because the year prior when Dad had put in all that course, John and I were the only ones that had his laptop, knew where all the buoys were, knew where all the cameras needed to go, knew everything about that lake, and so it fell on us to put on that U.S. Open. And that was kind of what really made me happy, was be able to give back to my sport, and the fact that I was able to help pull off that tournament. We had a huge, endless list of people, Ronnie Barton, Casey Mommer, Dana Garcia, Steve Garcia. There's a huge group behind that backed that tournament. But I mean, it was cool to be a pivotal part in the middle of that allowed that tournament to have success, and I was lucky enough to win that tournament too.
Oh,
and
wow.
And so at that point, I called up Jerry Jackson right after. Jerry had really helped us and get JT set up on all his stuff that he needed, and Gene at the time was still alive, was helping us get all set up. And I called Jerry and I said, hey, will you sign me off as a TC? Like, I know this stuff
In and out.
through in and out. Like, just go ahead and sign me up. I'll go take the test, and that way I at least have my rating, so I can help JT out, or I can help Kyle Ead out at Fluid, or McCormick's if need be, whatever I need to do. And he's like, well, we have a new process. And so I had to go be a junior TC for a whole year. And of course, I did a tournament here. I did a tournament at Fluid, and I drove up to Picos's and ran a tournament up there, and I got signed off for my TC. But that really opened the door big time for John and I, because now both of us being certified TCs, both being senior judges in jump, and I never got my senior in trick. I can't judge a trick run to save my life. But, we started getting the phone calls to start being able to travel and do different TC tournaments, man. So I did the Mexican Nationals. I was a TC for the Pan Am Games down in Peru.
Yep.
A couple years ago. John and I did the Colombian Games down in Cartagena. We were somewhere down in Colombia, and we got to run that tournament. That was really cool. We were down there for like 2.5 weeks.
I remember that.
Setting that one up in the ocean.
I remember that because the organizer ended up using my dad's system for the camera for slalom. Yeah.
So and it was great, man. We got we went to Ukraine and we put on still the biggest cash prize jump event there's ever been. John and I went over there and we ran that, and it's really cool to be able to contribute back to the sport and on a tournament level, but I think I get my most satisfaction out of it doing it for your average Joe.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna go, because there's a sense in which the way I know and I see TC operating, it's like, okay, my job is to make sure that everything is where it needs to be, right? And I'm sure that, my recollection of your dad at pro tournaments was exactly that. Yeah. Like working as hard as possible, like I've seen other TC do, to just make sure that there would be no discussion about where things are positioned, and so that skiers can ski.
Yeah.
But then you guys took it to another level, you and John, where you now go and set up courses in some lakes that people want courses at. And yet my sense is that you're putting the same amount of care and precision that you would at a U.S. Open on Lake Ivanhoe.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
It was after that U.S. Open. I had done some work for Dad setting up courses in some odd places. We had done Eola at the time. We had done Ivanhoe. We had put a new slalom course in at Okeechobee one year on the Trick Lake because they were Big Dog was coming around. They wanted to run slalom on a different event with the lights. And so I'd worked with my dad, and I loved the challenge of dropping in a new course. And I was always the water guy. So I would dive down to an anchor. It needs to go 10 meter, maybe meter and a half north and 30 centimeters to the right. I said, okay, and I'll dive down. It was always this little mental challenge I had to see how close I can get it on the very first move and how many times it took me to get it. And I was good at it. And so I should have acted worse about, it'd been worse because I ended up being the water guy. Because I was, good at being bottom of the lake and knowing my surroundings and getting anchors moved, but I loved putting in something new. A lot of TC is fact checking and making sure that things that are already in place are as accurate as they can be. I love the side of being a TC where I'm creating something from scratch. Mm-hmm. When I'm starting on an Excel sheet filled with a ton of zeros, and each item out of 26 buoys that I input, each item, it's building this formula of this slalom course, and I'm seeing the accuracy start to develop, and I love unfolding a slalom course or a jump course that way.
Yeah.
Rather than, if I come to Jack's and I survey 2 balls 2 centimeters wide, okay, I'll go hop in and move it, but then we're done. Yeah. I love seeing it, typing in data and seeing it unfold. And, back when I first started, I would write everything down on hand on a scratch piece of paper. We would shoot the entire course, write it all on paper, go get the laptop out, set it up, input all this information, all these numbers into Excel, and then it would basically spit out what you had to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got out of the 26 buoys, I got 20. I got to go move. And then, since then we've got it down from about a 2-day process to I think our record's about 4.5 hours putting in a brand new slalom course from scratch.
That's quick.
So, technology has definitely come a long way since then, but I got into it. I love numbers. I'm a math guy, and seeing the numbers behind the way a course goes in and the math behind it and the angles behind it, I get off on that a little bit.
Yeah.
And not to mention the fact that, I got a weekend warrior that has scraped together some money with a couple other buddies that just won a slalom course so they can go drive each other at 6 a.m. every morning. Those guys are more stoked about a slalom course being in their backyard than people realize. And, we get spoiled. I'm looking out here at a beautiful slalom course as we sit. But these guys are these old school slalom skiers that have dreamed about having a course in their backyard. They finally made it. They're in their 50s, and they got the money to be able to put one in, and seeing their reaction. And I've never had a course that I've put in for what I would call a weekend warrior that they haven't skied it within the next 30 minutes of us being done. I'm still wet from moving the last boat guide, and they're like, do you think you could hang around and pull me for a quick set just so I can go ski my new course? I would love to.
Yeah.
And that was my big thing for it. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what's going to be my next comment, is the fact that, yes, the numbers and the satisfaction of knowing that you put a proper, legit course together on some random body of water, but then the emotion of the person that employed you or asked you to do it, that goes, wow, after the first pass, Yeah,
they love it, and those have been some of the coolest ones we've done. Like JT and I did this little, call it a mini road trip up in Michigan 2 summers ago. And we got a call from one guy that wanted a course at his lake. And then he told his buddy about it, who also had a course that needed to be adjusting. And then a good friend of ours, Cale Burdick, heard what we were going to be in town. And so all of a sudden, we were going to fly up for 3 days to put this guy's course in. We had stayed up there for 9 days, and we just borrowed this guy's truck, and we brought all our equipment up, and we went around and just
course after
course, and got everyone fixed up. And I mean, that was 9 days. We worked our asses off. I mean, we did a lot of swimming, but a lot of smiles, and I got a text from the guy today. His name's Mark. It's up where Silver Spray is.
Yep.
Up in Michigan. He texted me today, just checking in on me. How are things going, man? And it's funny when his name pops up. Mark, Michigan course install.
Right. Right.
But it's
the notes.
But it's cool to have guys like that I never would have met, never would have contacted. That our name got passed around.
Yep.
He made the effort to reach out and call us, and we made it happen. And now we have a friendship that's lasted the last couple years, and still checks in just because we went up there and installed a course for him and his sons to enjoy while they're home from college during the summer, and he gets to enjoy when his wife brings him out there to pull him for a slalom set.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that really, really gets me, and I love it for that.
And I think, in terms of giving back to the sport, right? Like, I don't know that there's, there's so, how can I put it? I started this podcast with the goal of promoting the sport.
Yeah.
And the more I try to do it, the more I realize that it's such a big, overarching thing to do that the best way is to tackle parts, right?
Yep.
So whether it's through coaching, through, doing something media like this, we all do our part to do it. But it's super cool to me how, you have some, as you call them, weekend warriors that they ski on this body of water, but they don't have access to a course. And now all of a sudden they have a course. Yep. So they might go to a local tournament, and they might get a membership to the association, and eventually buy some new skis, and the whole thing increases.
I think it does help. I don't know if there are numbers to back it or if they're out there, but in the back of my head, I know it helps.
Yeah.
I know these guys are out there, and Nautique did their swerving weekends for a while, and when that was going on, I was still with Nautique at the time. I was, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
That is right up my alley. Go, and it was cool I did a Seattle stop 2 years in a row, and I saw the same son and father who I had coached the year before. Son never skied before. The dad hadn't skied in 20 years.
Yeah.
And they'd come out there, and then a year later, the dad had already skied a tournament earlier that summer, and after taking 20 years off, and the son was now down to one ski and was out there. He had a whole new setup. The family was looking to buy a new or buy a used boat, or but they were invested in the whole family was out there, where the first time around it's just the dad and the son, and then the next summer it was the wife and the two other kids, and it was a whole family affair. And that's how I got to grow up, was a family affair that went tournament to tournament or lake to lake every weekend. So seeing little things like that, and I think putting a course on a body of water is a step in the right direction, and I know it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I sleep a lot better at night knowing that at the end of the day, I would have loved to be able to contribute more, maybe in a financial sense, to the sport to help it grow, but I was able to actually kind of, I was able to lay some foundation blocks out there for people to build off of, and then, same way that we're here talking on a podcast about it, and spreading a word and growing it, and anything that I can give back to this thing that has given me so much, sign me up. I'm
and I think obviously we always talk about money, and money is necessary, but I think good ideas that are targeting the growth of the sport, they might need some money to be backed, but sometimes it's just the idea, and the willingness, the motivation to pursue it, know. And I regard something like what we're doing now, or what you and John do so well, as one of those good ideas, Now, speaking of courses, I don't know if you did it, but I know for a couple of years, John has been asked to basically do the tech work at the Masters.
Yeah.
Just a side connection, what is your experience of that event? Because I'm sure you skied it junior, you skied it pro. What does that event mean to you?
So that was my first exposure to pro skiing. Jack and Lonnie, the first time I got permission from my parents to, because my parents never been. Jack and Lonnie haven't missed a year in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
And I was, I want to say 9 or 10, and Jack and Lonnie were driving up with a couple students at the time that were competing. I don't think juniors had just started off there at the Masters. This would have been late 90s, right around 2000.
Yeah.
Ski Fly was still there. And I loaded up in the van, got permission from my parents to go up and spend the weekend away. And JT and I went up there and watched the Masters. And we brought our bikes and we rode around the gardens. And Jody Seal was working with Nautique at the time. And he brought up the Ski Fly boat and offered to let me ride in the boat when Jarrett ski flied.
Oh, wow.
One time, and for one of the practice rounds, back when they let you practice ski flying, and that was like insane. And so from that memory on, I haven't made it the last 2 years, but up until then, I hadn't missed a Masters. You know, whether I had an injury or I was on crutches or whatever it was, that was a tournament that, coming up in what is now a couple days, everyone's gearing up. I won't be able to make it this year, but it's every weekend I look forward to the last weekend of May because I was going to Georgia, whether I was competing, whether I was watching. That's where my first eyes caught a glimpse of what water skiing was on the professional level.
Yeah.
And to see the people that come year after year who don't ski, but they live around town, they live hours outside, or they have now since moved states away, they still travel back to the Masters every year just to watch it. And it's a really cool vibe and aura that is around that lake there. Yeah. And then to be asked to come up there and work and help be a part of the behind the scenes portion of that was really cool. And it started with John and I. We had a beam and ramp that Ron and Mary Koenig had purchased and brought down from Michigan. And at the time, a lot of the jumpers know this, but what a lot of people don't know is John is probably one of the most technical, knowledgeable guys on jump ramps. Yeah. Even though he's a slalom skier, he's who I go to for jump ramp advice. Right. When my jump, when I was living in Winter Garden, was breaking down, I called John to come take a look at my ramp. Freddie, Ryan, every top jumper has had JT, has had a powwow with John on what they can do to make their ramp better or feel better, because these ramps at Jack's have been so good for so long. And as they got older, John was at the age where he started tweaking things and seeing what he could do differently on the ramps with padding or fiberglass or textures to make it better for jump, even though at the time he was really kind of aging out of his jumping career. Yeah. So we had a ramp here that we had brought down from Michigan, and it was the first year that Beeman wasn't going to be available to bring a jump ramp up or something along those lines. And it had gotten to the Nautique crew. John and I are both athletes. Hey, well, we have a ramp that we've taken to a couple Pro Tour stops. We'll do the ramp this year. So we loaded the ramp up and brought the ramp up, set it up, on Wednesday, had it out there in the water. We were on site to kind of help get it raised and lowered and flipped. And then it was a couple years ago or 2 years ago, they called us and asked us to, redo their jump course. And I know John talked about this quite a bit on his episode, and that was the pinnacle moment where I was like, man, I think we made it. If the Masters is calling for us to come up and do some work for them, then I think we're doing all right. Yeah, right. And I think we're trusted enough, and we went up there and we dropped in a whole new slalom course, and I know John will tell you that was the most accurate slalom course we've put into this date. I think our largest variation on a buoy was 2 centimeters, or maybe slightly less, and that's on a lake that is in areas 30 plus deep. So to have that small a variation on that deep of a lake is really unheard of. But myself, John, and then now of late, Will Asher has been getting really involved with it, and he likes the numbers and he likes the crunching and he likes the starting fresh and the idea behind it. And so now Will's kind of got that bug, which is cool to see. And so as I've been working more in this, kind of being more the family man the last couple of years, it's been nice to have Will there, kind of filling in where I can't make it. So that was probably the highlight of our courses that we've installed.
Yeah, I mean,
I was doing the Masters.
And tell me this, because since you had you've been entrusted to put courses or ramps at the Masters, you must have showed up to Callaway before everything is set up. Because as a skier, you see Callaway as the beach, the tents, the pavilion all set up, the boats all over the place, the inflatables, and the crowd. But you take away that weekend and maybe some other events they might have throughout the year. Callaway is a pond in a park, right? And I'd be curious to hear, because I had a chance one time, a very good friend of mine from Italy who we did junior skiing together. He had never been to the Masters.
Yep.
So we were on a trip on the East Coast. I said, look, let's just stop at Callaway,
I'll show you
what it's all about. And it was fun because as we drove to the parking lot where the skiers normally park, to him it was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
But to me, I could visualize everything that goes on in there. And we actually stepped up all the way on the roof of the pavilion, because you can, the ladders are there. And I was like, this is where, Freddie did the world record at the Masters, and this is where Andy won so many times. Like, you can see it, What was it for you to show up and nothing was there?
That was the one and only time I've been there. We went up, I want to say beginning of April. It was still really cold out.
Yeah.
And that was really the only weekend that we could be available, because then our April tournament started. John and I were committed here for tournaments in Florida. We couldn't get away on a weekend. I worked all week.
Yeah.
And so we went up, and pulling into town, you imagine to pull up and you start seeing Masters and Nautique banners, the little flag sticks down the road, and all of a sudden you pull in, and then we pulled into the gate, and there's the same lady that's checking everybody in, but it's just one car checking in this time. It's not the line of 15 cars.
Right.
I got to get there to, so-and-so's on the water, and checked in, and we pulled around, and it was just a couple people riding their bikes around. Really, it was quiet. It was eerie. Exactly. But at the same time, like you just said, I could close my eyes for a second, and I'll remember watching Freddie break the world record. I was actually on top of the pavilion when that went down. And I remember watching Jarrett ski fly there, and I could just close my eyes, and I could paint you so many different pictures that I've seen there I've probably been there 18 times over the course of my life. And a lot of really cool memories or things I remember that I could, that's where the concession stands are, and that's where Nautique sets their boats up, and here's where they have the little kids rides you can ride sometimes. There's where the aqua park used to be,
Right.
And I could just, but it was cool to be there quiet with nothing going on, because it gave you a chance to bring in all those old memories that you hadn't thought about in 15 years. Like, oh man, remember when they used to have the starting dock here? Or
at the beach area for
the beach end, yeah. Or they had the big green dock off the edge of the pavilion where they started everybody from, that you could actually kind of ski up and ski off of.
Yep.
But I hadn't thought about any of that, because every year I'd gone there, it was something new, and it was all set up, and it was tough to envision it, but it was having a blank slate to remember all these amazing memories that the Masters has told over the years, and then to be there working and setting it up. And then I know John talked about being on the bottom of the lake, and I could see anchors that I guarantee were there back when, Linda Giddens was a badass on tour, and all these amazing people that came through the sport. Like, they went around the same anchors now that are are brittle and rusted and broken apart at the bottom of the lake and just slid out of the way. But I know the story that goes behind those,
Right.
and it's cool to be at the bottom. And that was an anchor definitely that's probably the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, here's some 80s anchors. I remember when they went through this phase in the early 90s and they tried getting away with this, and then now here we are setting in what we've an anchor's an anchor to a point, but here's our mark, here's our footprint.
Yep.
on Robin Lake, and this one will be here to stay a lot longer than a record book or something like that. This is a foundation of the Masters, which is cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. Look, one of the last things I want to ask you is about jumping, right? And well, before we get there, like, I think there's been, throughout your time even, but even throughout the decades, there's always been one guy or one girl who's pushed just a little further. Might have been distance, might have been a new way to jump, like new technique, or just sheer courage, like. The first one I want to ask you is about Timmy Bradstreet.
Yeah.
Because I know that he was here. He was obviously younger than you, but he was around.
Yep.
And he, obviously you guys weren't too far in age, but he seemed to be the new you, the new guy, the young, was jumping far, really far.
Yeah.
What is your recollection of those days? He was obviously a lot here at Jack's.
He was a blast to be with. He was here and trained together, and the previous year I had actually gone to Australia, and I was coaching the Bryants, and I lived with the Bryants over in Albury, and then I was in Australia for 3 months. So I got acquainted with him a lot more, and Timmy and I got along great. Now we put on a show like we were rivals and hated each other, and maybe that might have been the view from the outside looking in, but him and I were both two young guys. I had already got established on tour. I'd been there a year and a half, 2 years. I'd won an event and was skiing well. And Tim was coming right behind me and smashing every record that I had set. And I had smashed those records previously pretty damn good. So, there was a part of me, I was like, damn, little ass man's coming in and beating all my stuff. At the same time, it was cool because I had never had anybody come up on my heels like that. Mm-hmm. And someone that was younger that had some different ideas and a different style that might have been better. So I had a glimpse to see what, maybe what Freddie and Dodd and some of these guys saw in me when I came on the tour. A little bit different style. So it was humbling in the fact that I kind of saw a version of myself coming onto the Pro Tour. And Timmy and I actually got along really well and had a lot of great conversations about styles in jump and theories in jump. And I think if Timmy, man, if he could have kind of kept his body together, unfortunately he had a bad injury, and I think he'll admit it as well. I think he came back a little too soon and pushed it a little too hard and had a really bad crash at 121 Worlds at Lake Hancock. And that kind of banged his body up pretty bad. I think mentally it hurt him pretty bad. And being in Australia and not as connected to the scene here in the States where it's not around him 24/7. And I think that ultimately is where his career drifted off at, man. But he was a hell of a talent, man. And he's one of the guys who he'd gone 228 as well at 5.5. And 6 foot, a lot of us, were questioning, well, his style won't work at 6 foot. And he had ended up cracking off some really big jumps at 6 foot. It's like, crap, well, it is working at 6 foot.
Right.
And he got second at Worlds in Russia. He did that at 5.5.
That's
that
right.
was really impressive. I think he had won Moomba, or he had
either second or first.
Second or I want to feel like he won Moomba, but he did it at 5.5. So that was his big push to get the 6 foot, was because Masters would only allow you to ski 6 foot in the open division.
That's right.
And I think he'd had a had a bit of a crash before then, wasn't able to ski masters, and unfortunately, we never really got to see a full glimpse of what his style could have brought to pro jump, and it really sucks because he was a super talented athlete, an amazing overall skier.
Amazing overall skier.
I mean,
yeah.
he's fast forward 10 years, Joe Poland is who comes to mind. Timmy had an aggressive style with jump. Joel's got a very consistent style with jump, but just the ability to be so good at all three events is, you'll see it in 1 and 2. You'll see Jarrett be amazing tricker and a jumper, and slalom, he was a damn good slalom skier for his height, but I mean, that was his event. Myself, I was a really good jumper, a really good slalomer, and tricks was my Achilles heel, and those were rare breeds to see someone's like a Tim Bradstreet or a Joe Poland to be that successful at all three events.
Yeah, which I think I had this conversation with Joel. Maybe like sledge started. Like I think that up until those days, you had the 2-event overall skier.
Yep.
That had to sort of keep the third one, high enough.
I think the first Jason Seals.
Oh, Jason, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think Jason came in. I think he was one of the first skiers to ever. He could trick over 10. He had run 39, and he'd gone over 230.
That's right. That's right.
And then Sledge kind of took it to another level, kind of doing that and stuff. And but now you have like Dorian and Joel. Oh my God. Thank God I got my under 21 overall title like 15 years ago, because there's no way I'm getting one remotely close.
Got that one.
Yep.
So yeah, Timmy, and then what about nowadays? Because I mean, obviously the easy question to ask is Jacinta breaking the 200-foot barrier.
That's huge.
Like, what do you think about her approach to jumping? And I'm curious to hear why, in your opinion, she managed to dominate the event. Like, I mean, that's unquestionable.
I think it's two things. She's one of those ones we talked about earlier. Was she's got a hybrid of raw talent on top of the water, and then she has the ability to mentally, I think, be one of the fiercest competitors on the water. Mm-hmm. And not taking anything away from any other women competitors. I know the intensity is there, but Jacinta, she found an extra 10% somewhere in there on the mental level to be able to kind of block out. And her style is unorthodox from what we would consider a traditional jumping style. There's a lot of things that you could say, well, if I did this different or did that different, but Jacinta's got the mental capacity to trust in her ability as an athlete, as a talented, with like some God-given skills in there, to be able to trust those enough to take it as far as she has.
Yeah.
Whereas some girls, they have the mental capacity to be able to charge at it and go after it, but maybe the skills are lacking a little bit. Just got just the right balance on of being on the edge enough to be able to push it to how far she has been dominant for as long as she has, and the mental capacity to consistently remind herself that I'm okay. I'm just within that threshold of being too far.
Yeah.
And I think that's where she has found so much success, is balancing that God-given ability and keeping herself mentally right on the edge of, NASCAR is a fun example to use for jump.
Yeah.
Is pushing that throttle as hard as you can and knowing that an eighth of that throttle, just a little bit more, is going to be too much. She does a great job of knowing exactly where that red limiter is, and it gets awfully close a lot, but she's damn good at keeping it right on the red line.
Yeah, and it's in my very small experience in coaching, and interestingly with a bit of a longer experience in working as a sports psychologist with jumpers primarily, actually.
Yeah.
It seems to be one of those like important skills. like having the technical and mental ability to push, but also to know when, for your ability at that moment, there's a red line, right?
Yeah.
And get as close as possible to that one, but not right there.
Yeah.
You know, that's an interesting, yeah, and I would agree. I mean, she has that down to a dot.
Yeah, and she's got the ability to, you know, if you think about it in RPMs in a boat and 5,000 RPMs, as that boat knows it's reaching capacity at 5,000, and it'll shoot at a straight line up to 4,500 RPMs, and then it'll taper off all the way to 5,000. And Jacinta's got the ability to keep that line dead straight all the way to 55, and then cap it. Whereas, you know, you'll see some other athletes that they can still hit that 55, but because it's tapering down at that point, you know, they're not hitting as often, as consistent, and she's really dialed in, and I feel for her being in Australia and in the times that we're in right now.
Yeah.
You know, traveling being difficult, and I imagine she'll stick with it. She's too good at the sport to stray away from it, but I know she's also got a full-time career back home studying and doing school, and props to her to be able to balance that lifestyle and be able to jump and do it at the level that she continues to do.
Yeah, no, unbelievable champion, really. You know, like as I said, like she has changed her sport, big time. Now, we spoke about a couple of incidentally Australian jumpers, and we talked a little bit about style. I'd be curious for you to describe your jumping style. And I guess just for the listeners, you know, like take some examples maybe of other skiers, of things you do kind of similar, kind of different. Just, it's hard to picture a style through voice, but
yep. You know. No, and I think I know how to paint my picture. I was trained old school. Okay. I was a turn and burn skier. I came from a lineage of coaching where Jack was, at the time, big skis were just starting to come around, and we really hadn't gotten into this fluid. Freddie had figured it out. Yeah. You know, a couple later jumps figured out, but I was in awe. I loved watching Jimmy Seamers and Ryan Fitz jump. I loved seeing wide on the boat, late cuts, and that right leg locked, and then just the rocket ship to the base of the ramp. So, granted, I did have a couple big jumps where I got some lift, but a lot of my jumps were purely based off speed. Mm-hmm. And my aggressiveness in the course building up to the ramp is where I did a lot of my work. Versus, you know, Freddie, Scott, Tom Asher, a lot of these guys, a lot lighter on the line, letting the skis do a lot more work for them, and then just some of the most beautiful ramp work you've ever seen, where they don't do a lot of crushing. You know, it's just every time they come off the ramp, they get this immediate lift and float down the lake, versus, you know, my style, which was a little bit more, you know, Jimmy, Curtis Shears, Ryan Fitz, this speedball to the base, and then just hope that everything I can come together somewhat off the top. And, you know, I had some really good success with that style. Zero off, when it came around, kind of changed the way we needed to jump. You weren't rewarded as much as we used to be with perfect pass, or, you know, manual driving. Kind of perfect pass following that was modeled after the way that people would manual drive, and then zero off was more of a numbers based rhythm control. And so you weren't rewarded for this huge late cut and turn. So, you know, a lot of us had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to redo it. Now, I was able to kind of revamp my style a little bit, but the idea of still, you know, being one of the guys that went the latest and pushed the hardest and pulled the driver the hardest, went the lowest letter, I was still there. But, you know, I had to learn to kind of taper that off a little bit and and work a little bit more on ramp technique and not just allow pure speed to get me to where I needed to be.
Yeah, yeah. And with that in mind, because I mean, I obviously watched this jump so many times, so I could picture it, and I think you gave justice to your style the way you described it. What I'll give you the context. I didn't tell you this, but I started jumping again last year.
Yeah.
Just for fun, you know. Bought a pair of skis whenever it's headwind, whenever I feel like it. No thoughts of competition. I just want to ramp a little bit.
Yeah.
And my distances are laughable. But when I get off the ramp and I feel the boat or my work or both bringing me in the air, right? There's no 41 I can run that would ever match that. And I'm jumping, I don't know, like 140 feet, 150, you know. But that feeling, I can't find it anywhere else. Describe the way you feel it.
That's the hardest question as a jumper that we ever get asked is what does it feel like? You know, I've skydived, I've ridden motorcycles, I've ridden in race car. I've done everything I can to try to match that feeling, and for me it is a time of bliss, of quietness almost, even though it is loud and it is a violent to your body sport, and there's a lot going on. That second, if everything on a perfect jump is going right from the second wake to the time you land, is one of the most surreal out of body experiences. You know, even though it takes us a split second, less than a second to reach the second wake to the ramp, we're traveling 70 miles an hour. If you could print out my transcripts of what goes through my head in that amount of time, I mean, it filled pages of, okay, where am I at? What is that wind? I see this off on the left. It's the one time you get to feel like Spider-Man in a movie, and everything goes to slow-mo, but you can still act in full body form, and it's everything else around you is in slow motion. And then we're in the air for a little bit over 2 seconds on a big jump, but it's a hell of a lot longer than that. I could feel every time that ski twitches up a little bit or I lean a little bit more, I feel every single thing in there. And I've never come close to replicating that in anything else that I've tried. Yeah. And I'm very grateful for the sport of jump for giving me the opportunity to even to feel that on occasion. Yeah. And it is so speechless. It is very difficult to describe, and I look forward to hearing a jumper that can put it into words that, somebody can, from the outside looking in, can understand what it's like, because it's like nothing else.
And I think it's the thing is that, I mean, of course, jump is not an easy sport, but I feel that you don't have to be a pro to experience that. No. I feel that you're, the person who gets maybe a little bit, even like a good single cut, but just a bit of a 3/4, if they do everything right within their own ability, they're going to experience that.
It's all in perspective of where you're at and where you've been. For me, when I went over 100 feet, and I got a picture of me when I was a junior and I was still wearing like the helmet with the chin strap. I laid out way over my skis, and I know I went 97 feet on that jump. My grandpa was taking photos on shore, and it was one of my first tournaments here where I'd almost gotten 100 feet. But I remember that feeling of that picture, and that same feeling whether I was going 97 feet or 234 feet. It was the same feeling of leaning over your skis, and as close as we'll ever get to being a bird or right. Flying and managing that. And, that same feeling doesn't go away from that first 3/4 you take, where, you do feel the lift, and you have the the moment of slight weightlessness against the boat, and the boat's not there anymore, and it's just you in the air above, surveying your surroundings, looking down at buoys, seeing the boat in your peripheral down there, and it's the same feeling you get at 100 feet that you still get at 230 feet. You just get an extra second when you go a little further, you know. But it's that same, I miss that, man. That feeling is that's something I wish that you could bottle it,
And I could see that you missed it, because when we took a break after the first part, I just heard the boat with the switch raving, and you just started standing up and looking who was jumping, Some listeners might not know, but you said you miss it. What happened?
So, for those of you who don't know, I was training for the Worlds. The last couple of years, I really haven't skied much. Family man now, and have a beautiful fiance at home, and her daughter at home, and so I love that. I work full time, and skiing, I haven't been able to make as much time for that, and was trying to get myself a little comeback tour. I figured that skiing at Jack's at a Worlds would be a nice little cap to my career, and in training, about 5 weeks out from Worlds, I went out the front on a single cut and broke my back. And in doing so, I didn't really realize the severity of my injury when it first happened. It was a small out the front. It was on a single cut, which, if you're a jumper, is almost embarrassing to say. But ended up shattering my T6 vertebrae, compression fractures in T8 and T9, fractured sternum, broken ribs, and really banged myself up a lot more than I thought, and ended up having to have emergency surgery to stabilize my back, and fortunate enough to not lose any mobility in any of my limbs. I was ridiculously close to being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and that was sobering in the same sense that maybe I can't just quite strap them on like I used to be able to. I'd been out of the scene for a little while, but I've come to peace with it. I wish I could jump again, but with the shape that my back's bolted together right now, it's not worth risking the family that I look forward to starting, and the future that I want to have, the longevity. I want to be able to teach my kids how to ski and do all this stuff down the road. But at this point, the risk of what jumping entails, and the ability that I would be able to enjoy it at, I think I would have a difficult time enjoying it just riding around and plopping over the ramp. My body doesn't, I don't know any better than to go 100%. And having been to the level of 230s and going that far, I would struggle to get myself back in the ring, maybe down the road. I'm not saying it's completely out. I think my fiance and my mom would say it's completely out of the picture. But, I'll go ride my skis again and, get back in the slalom course and stuff. But I think my days of competitive jumping are finished. But extremely grateful for the community that I had around me in that time. They super supportive. I was able to get out here for the Worlds and spend some time out here with everybody, and it was a pretty rough rehab process the first month. My fiance Danelle, quit her job to basically live at home with me.
Oh, wow.
And do everything she could just to get me off the couch, to feed me, use the bathroom, spend some time in the hospital. My sister and my mom were right there. The Garcia family was there right away. So, it was a lot of people that jumped up and took a hell of really good care of me after that accident. And that reminded me of why I love the sport so much. I love the jump and I love the thrill of it, but I love the family 10 times over. So for that, I'll still be around, and I'll still be involved, and now I'm trying my hand at golf.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I still suck at that. It's like me golfing is the equivalent of me doing toe tricks, but I love it and it's fun. And I think what's fun about it is I'm not great at it, but I improve quickly, and that's kind of what got me hooked on skiing to start with. And I'm addicted to it. I love it, and my body can hold up to it so far. And so I enjoy doing that and keeping myself active. And now that I'm getting a little more settled in with my new career and new job, there'll be a lot more time to getting back involved and making time for skiing again and being in the community again. So,
which I mean, that I can't even begin to tell you how happy it makes me to hear this.
Yeah.
Just one final thought. Obviously, you're talking quite a bit about family since you have one, and congratulations on the engagement.
Thank you.
If you could give some advice to some ski families whose kids might be wanting to jump, but the parents, the family is a little scared, a little, like this happens often and probably for the right reasons, right? The kid wants to jump, but they don't know much about it, and they just see it as this very dangerous thing. So the hell with it, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's right. What advice would you give to parents that have a young kid that wants to start jumping?
I think it's you got to trust it, and you got to honestly take a good look at your kid or whoever in the mirror and realistically ask yourself, do they have the ability or do they have the mental capacity to fall and get up? Because there is going to be falling and getting up. And as a parent, if you don't come from a family with the experience in jumping and starting with jumping, the biggest thing, if you're able, is get yourself around people who know how to guide them into that sport.
Yeah.
Race car driving. I could drive a car. I could drive stick shift, and I sure as hell know I could drive it really fast, but I have no business knowing how to corner or decelerate when I need to or anything like that. And I think if the parents got to look in the mirror, if I don't have the ability to guide them in a sport like this, ask for help or, reach out to people that do know how to start them off down the right path.
Yeah.
I hate that my story with my injuries, some with jumping, I blew my knee out 3 times. One of those was jumping.
Yeah.
And, the back thing was really a freak accident. There's a lot of guys in jumping who have been doing it a long time, who've had really successful careers that still aren't even at the professional level, but they've never been, severely injured. So I hate when people look at jump and they automatically think, well, you're going to blow knees out, you're going to get hurt, you're going to be walking, weird the rest of your life. I hate that. And I'm not the best example, but I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who, like Freddie, for example, is mid-40s, and he's had some crashes and had some injuries, but he's a able-bodied guy who's put together. Dodd had some injuries and stuff like that, but no more than your kid would get playing football or hurting the knee or ankle in basketball or taking a baseball to the head playing baseball. There's and I think if your kid lives too much of a sheltered life, that's I don't think they get the full experience of what could be.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of, if you want to try it, well, I'll let you.
Right.
But I'm going to make sure that I'm letting you do it in the safest way possible that I can, which is with somebody who knows how to guide someone jumping. And if you don't have access to a jump all year round, there's plenty of jumpers who have done online instructionals and videos and YouTubes, and there's all kinds of ways to gain information about the sport to make it less intimidating and not as scary as it seems to be when when you watch NASCAR and you only watch the crash highlights. Those come, but there's a lot of technical abilities in there that you can learn.
Yeah.
And I encourage families to seek guidance and seek the coaching, especially for a sport like jumping.
Yeah.
And then let your kid have some fun, man. It's we can't match that feeling. You and I were just talking about it, and we both slalom all the time, and we both have done all these other things in life, but jumping is a feeling that you don't know until you get it.
Yeah.
And I encourage parents to allow their kids the opportunity to be able to achieve that feeling one day, because it's like no other.
I couldn't have said it any better. The opportunity to reach that feeling.
Yeah.
Look, Zack, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we got to sit here in the tower at Jack's, where you spend so many hours and days to talk about this. You and the brilliance that you brought to the sport of water ski jumping, and all your many contributions to our sport. I always give a bit of room for a bit of gratitude, so take it, bring it, whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool. It's been a while since I've sat down and reminisced about skiing. And thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the opportunity to dive back into all those great memories that we've built over the years that this sport's allowed us. And I miss it a little more right now. I kind of
sorry.
No, it's okay, man. That's good. It's a good feeling to have. It reminds me of how much the sport's brought to me, and I absolutely love what you're doing and sharing people's stories of all of our careers and love for this one little thing that brought us all together.
Yeah. And
I appreciate you putting that together for everyone to listen, and I know it'll make a change in the sport that we love so much. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for letting me talk a little bit, man. I loved it, dude, and it was good to remember those feelings.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Anyone else you want to thank?
Travers family, we're sitting out here. I wouldn't be here without them. The Garcia family contributed a ton to my success and my love for the sport, and the kids, and Allie and Tay and Steve and Dana. My mom for being an amazing rock through my entire sport. My dad during his time here for everything that he allowed me to gain and the knowledge that he passed along to me, and hopefully I can continue to pass along. And then to to Danelle and to Ari, my family, and everyone that I look forward to growing with, and then getting my turn to play dad and get my kids involved. So I look forward to that moment, and I love all you guys, and thank you, man, for having me here. It really means a lot.
Well, it was true pleasure. I hope in not too distant of a future we get to do this again.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you.
Thank you, buddy.